All right, I'm very excited for my fourth Talks at Google to welcome Kari Byron, best known, of course, for the Discovery Channel show MythBusters, but she's done many, many things since. For over a decade, she's been a strong presence in the world of reality-based science television. She's hosted Thrill Factor, Head Rush, Punkin Chunkin, Large and Dangerous Rocket Ships, LDRS, super cool. She spent a lifetime acquiring odd skills and interests. After graduating college as an artist, she traveled the world, decided to settle in San Francisco to pursue a career as a sculptor, which is amazing, but ended up discovering that handling poop, eating bugs, wiring explosives, and scraping chicken guts off the ceiling was a real dream job. Perfect resume for Google. All right, I'm very excited to welcome Kari to Google.
Hello. Well, thanks for bringing me out here. I'm from the Bay Area, so for me, I've watched Google grow. I mean, I came here with Jamie for a photo shoot you guys had when it was like an open floor with some cubicles, and I was so impressed because you had a candy wall. You have grown a lot.
Candy wall shrunk.
Yeah.
So before we talk about everything you've been up to since MythBusters, I have to ask, is your job as insanely fun as it appears, or are you just some terrific actor?
Well, I'm definitely not a terrific actor, and if you look at early MythBusters, you can tell how nervous and awkward and bad I am at talking. It is really, really obvious. My job is actually very, very fun. That is one thing that we always had, is MythBusters was one of the few shows that was on reality, that was actual reality. When we were hurt, we were hurt. When we were happy, we were happy. And we were doing some really fun, interesting stuff. And when it was boring, they would just edit it out, so.
No, and even with all the setup, because with all the shows you've done, there's a lot of stuff that gets filmed and done or not filmed behind the scenes. Is that stuff still fun, or is there any part of it that's kind of like a drag when you hear actors talking about the hours of waiting in the trailer and the drudgery of making a film? Was it all fun?
Well, we were all friends, and we actually had chemistry. So before we all had Angry Birds so that everybody would ignore each other, we had these really fun games that we would do when, say, there was some sort of safety protocol, like, the bomb squad had a full hour that they had to wait, and we were stuck in a bunker. We would come up with old-timey games like throw the rock at the can, and we would have so much fun trying to see who could hit the can. Like, we always had fun, even when some of the things kind of dragged on. We all had very similar senses of humor, which slowly got lower and darker because that's what happens when you get familiar with people, and we all just kept each other very much in stitches.
Cool. You went on to college for film and sculpture. You're most well known for your science-oriented programming. How has your background as an artist influenced how you communicate science?
Well, I come from a long line of sciencey and arty people, and I feel like they are in the same vein. It's all about fostering a curiosity. With art, you're taking an idea and you're trying to explore it in a visual way that helps you come to some sort of conclusion or feeling about that question. And science is the same thing. It's just exploring your curiosity. The difference is, I feel like over time, science became very sort of, when I was growing up, almost like clinical, where it was identifying the parts of a cell. Whereas when it really gets fun is the way we did it on MythBusters, is where you get really dirty and you get your hands on it and you do it the way you do art. You're throwing a pot, you're getting your hands in the goo. So
that kind of builds into this question. Is there's a perception among some that science is not a creative endeavor, that creative people pursue the arts. What have you learned about science, especially past what you get in high school, about the creativity of scientists and those that pursue science?
Well, I think it's pretty obvious in the tech community. You guys have figured it out that a great diversity actually comes to a better space in solving any sort of problem. So when you bring an artist into a scientific field or vice versa, you come up with the most beautiful things. Look at kinetic sculptures. When you take science and apply it to art and you make these incredible moving pieces, I think it works the same way. You just have a different approach. And over the years, I've learned that art and science are pretty much in the same vein.
Intermeshed. You've also emceed some amazing events showcasing student scientists, from the White House Science Fair to the VEX World Championships in Disney World. Super cool. What have you learned from the students that you met over the years?
Never underestimate young people because they are so much more sophisticated than I was as a kid. And when you talk to a 12-year-old, you talk to them like they're a 35-year-old. You know, it's I've learned so much from them and their experiences because everyone at that age is so honest and will tell you exactly what's happening, and they're so creative, and the world's just so open, and it's just such a beautiful way to approach it. And I think sometimes as we get older, we lose that need to be fascinated.
Well, I can tell you, we have thousands of interns every summer. A few are probably in the audience right now, and it's amazing what interns can accomplish before they've even finished their college degree. Very true. So a lot of it is written about how you visited MythBusters and never left. For students that have no idea what they're planning to do with their lives when they grow up, what have you learned about making the most of unexpected opportunities?
Well, I feel like I was almost too young when I went to college to truly appreciate it. I mean, that might be pretty universal, but I don't think that I was the kind of person that took advantage of it the way I probably would now. For me, when I was traveling, that's where I really learned how to say why not and to go for opportunities, because I was traveling alone around the world. I had a friend to start with, but then we went our separate ways, and it was just the sort of thing where you just have to, even if it's scary, you have to try it. And I feel like that is what led me into MythBusters to start with, because I tried advertising and I was bored, and I tried all these different careers and I just couldn't find myself. And I came, to MythBusters in my late 20s, but I was ready to just work for free. I was like, I will be an intern because I want to do sculpture, and special effects seems like an easy fit because you guys get paid to do sculptures. How did I know it was a dying art? At the time, the practical effects were just crumbling beneath the crushing computer industry. But I really, really wanted to learn how to have an interesting life. And so I thought if I just do it for free, sooner or later I will prove myself worthy and maybe they'll pay me.
Now, you had a long run with MythBusters. Was there ever a point where you wavered or it got old, or did you just manage to have this incredible long run where it was fun the whole time?
I mean, it changed along the way. It's peak fun when we had the least amount of cooks in the kitchen, where we were just allowed to run with it and kind of do what we wanted. Whenever anybody tried to mess with the formula and try to figure out what makes it popular and do more of that, that was always a little hard. Like for a while, they kept trying to make us fight. They would, like all those chopper shows were so popular, so they would take me aside. This is back when Scotty was there. They'd take me aside and be like, "You know what Scotty said about what you did? You know what she said about your build?" And then she'd take Scotty's side and be like, "Oh, this is what Kari just said about you." And they try to get us to fight. And I'd be like, "Oh, you're probably right. Your way is better." And they're like, "No. Never works. We're falling for it. We like each other."
So you've already brought up that diversity is so important, combining sciences and technology and gender. So specifically about getting more women to pursue STEM, which is a huge priority at Google, and we've got a long way to go. We've been very public about that. It's a persistent challenge. What have you learned about inspiring kids, especially girls, to ignore those stereotypes or look beyond them?
I mean, I feel like we've made a lot of progress. I mean, not too distant past, I was, would have been chaining myself to other women trying to get the right to vote. And then my mom's generation was burning their bras trying to get me to go to college. And now we're here where, when I don't remember seeing a lot of women in dynamic scientific positions on TV. If they were in a doctor show, they were the nurse. They were never the scientist. They were never the smart one. And now every TV show you look at, you see actual women represented in smart scientific fields. And, maybe by the time my daughters are grown up, superhero women won't have to fight in high heels. Like, I feel like progress is being made. I know that when I don't know if I'm an expert in this at all. I do know that the girls I talked to at the White House Science Fair seemed like they were. They had it down. I asked them, what got you into it? And they all had these great stories of triumph to get to where they were, but mostly supportive parents, especially a supportive dad, was really, really important. Having role models they could look at, like people like Ellen Stofan from NASA, seeing women like that succeeding was really important. Seeing themselves reflected in the media was very important. but also mostly it was being able to find like minds. You may be the only girl in the math club at your small school, but there's another only girl in Minnesota in the math club. And if you guys can get online, which is the beauty of the internet, you can actually connect, you can feel that support, and maybe you can help each other stay, because I feel like people get interested in things but fall away when it's hard or when they feel like an outsider. And if you're the only girl, you might feel like an outsider. So you gotta network and help each other out. We, as women, also have a tendency to compete and tear each other down, and we've been raised that way. Whereas I think we're trying very hard to start being supportive. Like every time I meet a woman trying to get into my industry, people are always trying to pit me against them. Like, she's trying to be like you, or her show's not as good. I'm like, there's a woman on TV. Are you kidding? I'm going to call her, and if we can help each other, this would be great. I wouldn't be where I am without people like Debbie Myers from the Science Channel. She's like, let's do a show that inspires girls. Let's do it. Like, she helps me out, and I'll help her out anytime she needs it.
Cool. You've always struck me, we were talking about this before, about being an accidental celebrity. By that I mean you didn't do theater. I tried to Google it and then I asked, no theater background. You weren't deciding to be a star. And so you were an accidental celebrity. You gained celebrity status by doing something you're passionate about. How different is real world Kari from the brand Kari? And is there any difference? And do you even think about that?
TV Kari wears a lot more makeup. My clothes are generally tighter on TV, I think. Or maybe that's just because of moving parts from machinery. I don't want to get hurt. I wear a lot less dresses on TV. That's about it.
But other than that, the Kari Byron we see on MythBusters and Punkin Chunkin, that is, you feel like you're able to be who you are.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't. When we started MythBusters, it's not like you have an audience like this, which would have been incredibly intimidating. You have a camera crew that you're friends with, and it's almost like making a home movie. And so it just slowly became part of what I did. And I don't live in the Hollywood structure as well, so I don't do red carpets and that kind of fun stuff. Except for maybe like once a year I get invited to something special and I'll go down to LA. So I think that maybe that would have fed me more of the celebrityness. But
now, MythBusters, I think you were on the red carpet for the Emmys. MythBusters never did win. It got nominated a ton. Did it ever win?
No.
All right. If MythBusters won an Emmy, total crime, what would be your acceptance speech?
Oh, they wouldn't let me give that speech.
Pretend that they won.
It's a small amount of time. I talk so much. Adam would totally take that.
Music. You'd get the hook. The best speeches get the music. Yeah. All right. So the internet does not have a great track record when it comes to the online treatment of women. How has your experience been with the online world?
At first, I had to get a thicker skin because we had message boards that we were encouraged to be very interactive with our audience, because that was what made MythBusters different, is that our audience was part of us. And I got my feelings hurt really easily when people would. I remember somebody called me a bubblehead, and I cried. I mean, it's just a silly insult, but it was just, it was a little tough. But I grew a really thick skin, and I just don't read that stuff, and I kind of laugh at it now. You just don't engage. And you definitely don't Google your name with the words feet or butt or you and any male co-star or.
So in a more positive light, you've been on David Letterman's show. It's a while back. Google it.
That was my first interview.
That was very early. It was very
so
early.
nervous.
I could tell you were amped up.
I was playing with my dress the whole time. My feet were sweating.
You've hosted Science Fairs. I mentioned the White House. Many cool events. What is the coolest door that's been opened because of getting some celebrity?
Oh my God, the White House. I mean, I got invited to host the White House Science Fair because there was an emphasis on women and girls, and I was so humbled by the experience. It was so incredible. I got to do this panel with some really incredible women and some girls that had made it to the science fair and hear all their stories, and we just got to sit around and talk, and I walked away from there just in awe. And then the president said my name out loud so my mom and dad could hear, which was amazing. And then they ushered me off to a little secret room with like Team Cayman and all these fancy people. And then the president comes over and gives me a hug. And I'm just like, what? This is so crazy. And then at one point, point, I had to go look for the bathroom. They just let me walk around the White House. Like, I was just walking around looking for a bathroom, like kind of looking for some like monogrammed M&Ms or something to steal, but it didn't. But then like John Kerry just walks past me on his phone. I'm like, whoa, how did I get here?
That's pretty hard to top. Yeah, I would have to agree. So on MythBusters Head Rush, you've had a chance to recreate and test some cool science. What is the most unexpected result? If you can choose just one that surprised you, was not what you were planning for.
There's so many different ones, and I've talked about them a lot. Like, bull in a china shop. I couldn't believe bulls were graceful. Couldn't believe elephants were actually afraid of mice. I couldn't believe that an ancient Chinese system using drums buried in the ground actually would trigger, you could hear somebody tunneling from far away from this old ancient system. But the most surprising I had was, I don't think I've ever talked about it, but on Head Rush, I had a science advisor that had this experiment for me where it was making, heating water in sort of an Erlenmeyer, and then he told me to put a lid on it. I was like, I feel like that's a pressure vessel, but you know what? You're the science guy. And then my gut kept telling me, this is a bad idea. This is a really bad idea. He's like, no. Well, I've done this before. I've done it a million times. I'm like, okay, he's the scientist. What do I know? So I made this experiment. I put my head down close because they wanted to get a shot, and then I stood up and it exploded. And it burned across my stomach so that the skin fell off. And I have like a kind of a scar the shape of a wolf, which is kind of cool. But it was a really important moment for me because it shook me, because I feel like there's this psychology that you think if a camera's rolling, you can't get hurt. If the camera's rolling, nothing can go wrong. And I also didn't trust my gut. And I only got hurt in a really uncomfortable way right before you have to go on vacation to a Hawaiian island. Oh, that sucked. Because the skin was coming off, but it was a small price to pay for a new awareness where I could realize, okay, you got to actually stay safe. Even if the cameras are rolling, trust your gut. And just because somebody has the credentials doesn't mean they're right.
So I'm going to ask a couple more questions and open it up to the Googlers. So start thinking, ask good questions. So on Punkin Chunkin and LDRS, you've had the chance to meet some really interesting people. And if you're not familiar with Punkin Chunkin, that's this event where you hurl a pumpkin really, really far. Crazy.
By any mechanical means possible. So we're talking catapults, trebuchets, air cannons. It can't be like rockets. And they go they've gone over a mile. A pumpkin.
And then on large and dangerous rocket ships, people take pretty much anything and turn it into these ridiculous rocket ships, and also have rocket ships that go super high. So when you've met these, both really cool shows, check them out. What have you learned about the people behind these crazy, insane stunts? Now you've had a chance to talk to them, meet them. Like, what makes them tick?
I mean, I have a great respect for anybody who follows a passion, especially weird passions. And the fact that these guerrilla engineers are just sitting in their garage and this is their hobby, to create a huge trebuchet to lob a pumpkin, and their whole year is dedicated to that. It's so much fun because they're the good kind of crazy. You know, they're using science and engineering in a wild and cool way, and they turn it into a family event. Like, everybody brings their kids, and kids get into the physics of it, and it's some of that unintentional learning that I always love, where it's, you know, it's the cheese on the broccoli. It makes it taste good. What? I learned something?
Yeah. And on your most recent project with the Travel Channel, Thrill Factor, also very cool, looks like a blast. How did you convince Tori to vomit and pass out on a stunt plane to show the effects of G-forces?
I mean, I didn't really tell him to vomit and pass out. That wasn't like me.
It's fantastic. Watch it.
Well, Tori and I are really good friends, and we do a lot of shows together because it's we're complete and total opposites. Like, it's really fun. And he was the one that brought the stunt planes to us because he met a rich guy that had stunt planes, and he's like, let's go out there to Vegas and do this. And I was a little dubious because it seems crazy. But Tori has a certain kind of charm where it's sort of like his men friends kind of, you know how men get where they love each other but they want to torture each other, you know. So we go up in the planes and he actually has a really great resistance to G-lock, and he gets to the point of fighter pilot before he passes out, and I think that made the pilot sort of challenged. He's like, "Oh, you haven't passed out yet? We're gonna make you pass out." And then after I watched Tori pass out, tumble, they basically just turned off the engines and let the plane tumble. And it was insane. And then I looked over like, oh my God, that's awful. How did he do that? He's like, oh, you want to do it now? I was like, no. Turned off the plane. It tumbled. Mind you, none of this made it to air. I suffered for nothing. Tumbled into the plane and then just puked. And then as I'm getting off the plane with my puke bag and the Travel Channel crews down there, they're like, all right, so how was that? I'm like, we both had to sit in a dark room for an hour before they could do interviews and stuff with us. And we had wanted to get the plane part out of the way, so we didn't do any of the preliminary stuff just yet, like walking in. And so I had to get the puke out of my hair and get the mascara out from under my eyes so I could pretend like it hadn't happened yet.
So one final question, I'm going to hand it off to the audience. So if you could have a cameo in one of the following, which would you choose and why? Star Wars, Star Trek, Game of Thrones, or Sharknado?
Now, if it was based entirely on fashion, the dresses and the outfits they wear in Game of Thrones is awesome, but the women don't fare too well. It's a little violent. Yeah. So, I would clearly pick Star Wars because Leia's I won't spoil the news. They're leaders, they're warriors, and they're equals, and they get to fly cool planes and.
How is that movie, because we were talking about this break, how has that movie affected your daughter? Like, what impact did Ray have?
I have a 7-year-old, so when we went to see the movie, she had no idea. She hadn't watched any of the Star Wars, and we went with my nephew who was 5 and so excited, and we went to the theater, and she's like, oh yeah, this will be cool. And then when it turned out that Ray appeared and she was the main character, my daughter yelled in the back, she's a girl! Everybody's laughing. After that, she went home, she made a wrapping paper lightsaber, and she she actually threw away all her princesses. Don't tell Disney. We didn't throw them away. We took all of our princesses and we gave them to a younger cousin, and it was all about Star Wars.
Cool. That's cool. Same thing happened to my daughter. So very cool. All right, so I have a helper here with a microphone and the dory, if there are any dory. There are some. All right, I will just go in the audience first, and I will look through the dory. The dory, by the way, is our internal mechanism for people watching on live stream to ask questions. So I will look through those for those in the live stream.
Okay.
All right, so we'll go to an audience question first. Yes?
Hi,
yes.
I'm Erica.
Hi.
I actually have 3 daughters, 7, 10, and 12. And also, very similar to you, engineering, art, sort of my whole life. I've kind of been in there. So I understand the desire. I wanted to know if you have heard of what's called she heroes, because I think that modeling is a sort of a really key thing for our daughters. And so there's a program called She Heroes where people like you and regular people do little video clips and give models to young kids, young girls for like being cool in science. So I was just curious if you...
I hadn't heard of it, but I will definitely put that on my look-sees.
Okay, cool.
I'll Google it.
Google it, because it's like having you involved in that, I think would be awesome.
Is that something you do?
I am friends with somebody who does it, so if you want the connection, I'm happy to set you up. So,
all right.
But it is a very cool program for anybody.
We've had our first question and plug. So I'm going to the dory. So what's the coolest skill you've learned while on MythBusters that you've used outside the show?
Should I say this?
Now, as soon as someone says, should I say this, the answer, of course, we need to hear it.
Well, as I love to do artwork, I used to really love the impressions that black powder would make after you exploded them. So I do some black powder painting. now at an undisclosed location that's completely safe and completely legal. And it's a fun medium to work with when you know how to do it safely. And I learned how to do it safely, and I learned that you can get anything on the internet from China for your artistic passions.
So I have to build on that because the explosions in MythBusters in slow-mo are phenomenal. And what is your favorite all-time explosion?
Oh, that's easy. Because, people always ask me about my favorite explosions, and, there's that pushing power of Ampho, and then C4 is sort of like a dirty, quick one, but, like, it might actually be an ignition, but when we shot guns at a propane tank, it made this gorgeous, billowing, fiery, probably not great for the environment cloud that in slow motion kind of rolled, and it was just beautiful. That and coffee creamer, also an ignition. When coffee creamer, we exploded it into the air and lit it with a flare, also just like a fuel-based kind of Hollywood-style explosion. The kind of thing that, you actually expect to see as an explosion.
Cool. Audience, I'm sure, yes?
I'm curious what your favorite myth was that either never actually made it to air or never got selected to even be done at all.
We've definitely had a couple that didn't make it to air either because they were ridiculous or we couldn't do them. We tried to do this one called Squash Weightlifter, where the idea was that one of those giant pumpkins from Monterey had the capacity to lift a car if it grew underneath it because it had that kind of strength. But turns out all of us have black thumbs and we couldn't grow anything. And we had this garden set. We tried it twice, 3 times. We had this garden set up with the best hydroponics because San Francisco, and this crazy grow light disco din. We had the seeds from some champion pumpkins, and we couldn't get anything bigger than this. We tried and we're like, oh, but it was really fun because we had that crazy garden, and I enjoyed it was a little zen going out there and trying to garden, but I guess the environment just wasn't supporting it.
Okay, so recently Google has been doing things like Deep Dream and Magenta with some basic forays into AI creating art and music. What would be some combinations of science and art that are just completely sci-fi that you would like to see become reality?
I would like my own slave robot android, for sure. They could light the explosions in my black powder painting closer than I could. That is a very complex question. I like it. Have you ever seen, I think they're called wind beasts? Wind beasts, those giant kinetic sculptures that move in the wind.
Yeah.
That's my favorite kinetic application of science to art. I thought that was so beautiful. AI scares me though.
These aren't real people. These are all. We're
wouldn't be surprised.
We're testing the advancement
I'm the beta
of AI.
tester on the scary AI.
Yes, we're going to go back.
They all look like regular people.
Well, we're going to analyze the laughs and make sure they were laughing the appropriate part. Yeah. All right.
So are there any scenes from MythBusters that were out that you really wish could have made it to air?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, there's so many, but I could tell you a super embarrassing one that was kind of funny. There was a point where we were out in the desert and tensions were high. It was hot. People were fighting. It got really sort of just very tense. And so I walked up into the middle of a tense conversation and just walked up to Grant and went, pull my finger. And they laughed very hard as that means you toot, right? Yeah. Okay. Well, I just felt like, I couldn't figure out anything to make this better. I was like, nothing better than a girl fart. Girl farts are funnier than dog farts.
I'm not sure how to go with that. So I'm not going to pivot off that question. So off the Dory, what advice, we'll take a couple more questions. What advice would you give to a young aspiring scientist? But I'm going to modify it a little bit. What a young aspiring female scientist?
Find a mentor and find an internship. Find someone doing what you want to be doing, because likely they will help you out, and people love talking about themselves. I've been doing it for like half an hour now. You can usually get in good with somebody, and they're likely to help you out. And everybody loves an intern. They work hard, they're trying to prove themselves, and they are cheap or free. So you can get your foot in the door, you can get some experience, find out if it's what you really want to do. And I mean, that's how I started on MythBusters, is just a lot of exploiting of free labor.
So you started with sculpture, and now you've mentioned like the black powder stuff, the kinetic art. Is sculpture still now TV, film, etc.? Is sculpture still your favorite, or you have a new favorite type of art?
No, I love sculpture. I think in 3D. Like I am a much better sculptor than someone who draws. If I have an idea of something, how I want it to look, I can make it in clay better than I can draw it. So for me, it's very calming, and I'm a bit of a multitasker. So I will do sculptures while I listen to podcasts or watch TV or try to have meetings when they're on, not Skype, because they can see that, and I still make a lot of them. And I use them as terrifying parental learning tools for my daughter. I make these things called manners monsters or behavior beasties to break her of habits, such as for a while when she was much smaller, she had a tendency not to flush the toilet. So we made a poop monster that looked like it was crawling out of the toilet that I said if it stays in there too long, it comes alive. We had booger monsters that, eat the boogers in your nose, and if you go in there and steal their food, they're gonna crawl out your nose and look for food. They might crawl in your ear and eat your brain, and you'll never learn to read. So we make these little, I have monsters for almost every bad behavior, so I've got a ton of them now, and they're creepy and little kind of Tim Burton-y looking things, and they cured her of nail biting real fast.
All right, who would back a Kickstarter campaign for a poop monster? All right,
It's about terrifying your children into good behaviors.
we'll take one more Dory and one more live question, and then we have time for a short meet and greet. So I'm going to modify this a little bit. So what's the most dangerous thing, not that you did on the show, but that you didn't do on the show because you finally figured out this would probably be too dangerous to film?
Anything Tori ever suggested, ever. End.
All right, so that's good. We'll bring Tori in for a follow-up, and that will be the lead question. All right, we had one more. Do we have the microphone?
Back to the art side, I do follow your black powder work. Try to dabble a little bit in it myself and cause a little bit more fiery explosions, probably in not as safe manner as you. But for the art side, you've done a lot of advocacy for technology, engineering, and all that. How do you feel companies like this? Like we have a makerspace here. It's called The Garage, and do you try to advocate that artistic side towards a lot of those ends too, those tech sides? Because I feel like sometimes that's lost when there's a lot of science and engineering and all that. You might lose some of that ingenuity or the fun of art that comes with it. Is that something that you often see, or is there anything that advocating-wise that you do on it?
Well, I love living in the Bay Area because we are clearly a strange bubble of people who here it's not STEM, it's STEAM. We put the art in the STEM because, I mean, mathematicians are artists and scientists are artists. And I think that the maker movement is incredible. And I love how DIY and sort of the whole sort of Etsy generation is kind of bringing it back to an arty form. And the Maker Fair is getting bigger every year. And it's so cool to see people applying all of their different brains into something even that's ridiculous, but beautiful and cool. I love the maker movement.
Cool. Well, I want to thank you for an awesome visit to Google.
Oh my God, thank you. This has been fun.
Just so that we fed Kari. She didn't have to pay for the food, shocker. Took her on a tour, and it was really exciting to have you here today. Thank you very much, and good luck with, I know the things you can't talk about, but Kari has some cool stuff coming. I'll leave it at that, and
we'll be talking about our new show. This week we make an announcement. So me, Tori, and Grant are back together again in another nerdy endeavor.